the most decorated Olympian of all time. He's got 28 gold medals. I heard someone, everything's fine. Are we okay? Is it safe? Yeah, we'll do our best. We'll did it. We tried, so yeah, if it gets terrible, then we will. So, but Michael Phelps. So I heard someone describe his gold medal accomplishments as he's earned more gold medals than like 70% of the countries that participate in the Olympics, and more gold that they've ever accumulated in their entire history. Anyways, go USA, right? But there are two elements to Michael Phelps' success in swimming, and really just any swimmer's success, that kind of blows my mind. The first one is they have to get rid of anything and everything that keeps them from winning. So, for example, personally, I don't shave my legs. I know you were wondering, but no, I don't shave my legs. I'm not a Speedo guy. Sorry for that image, but wearing one of those rubber caps is not generally the look that I'm going for. I'm more of like a, shorts and wear your shirt while you're swimming so the sun doesn't murder you type of guy. But if I wanted to be a competitive swimmer, I'd have to embrace that. I'd have to shave the legs. I'd have to, finish the sentence. And I apologize for the mental picture, but anything that slowed Michael Phelps down, gone. But not only that, second, he has to implement crazy self-discipline. And I heard in a video him describing what his training looked like. He would swim for 1,800 consecutive days, 12 miles. Like, swim 12 miles. Every single day, no breaks on Christmas, not on his birthdays. Every single day for 1,800 consecutive days. And he would eat somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12,000 calories each day to do this. He'd have like pasta for lunch and a pound of pasta for dinner. And so I guess if we're just wondering, you want to lose weight, just swim 12 miles a day. That's what we've been missing, right? No. It's wild. And this is what it took for him to become an Olympic champion. The depressing thing is that when my kids, or my, Lord willing, grandkids, when they hear Michael Phelps' name, they're going to be like, who's that? Who's that? His record for gold medals probably one day will be broken. And those gold medals will probably one day just gather dust in some museum. In verse 25, Paul says this. He says, every athlete exercises self-control in all things, and they do it to receive a perishable wreath. But we exercise discipline for an imperishable, for something that lasts forever. And so Paul's saying, if athletes, they train like they do for crowns that will perish one day, how much more should we as believers in Jesus be willing to discipline our lives and to do so for the souls of people who last forever? The crowns we're striving for, it's not for our name to be made great or for our name to be once put on a plaque and that hangs in the rafters or something like that. We're laboring for a crown, which is the souls of our neighbors, your coworkers, your kids, grandkids, family members. This is what he's saying. So what does this mean? I've got three things I want us to consider together. The first one is this, is we, as a church, we must sacrifice preference to reach the lost. This is a difficult thing. If we want to reach people, we have to sacrifice our preferences in order for that to happen. One of my favorite TV shows is called Parks and Recreation. And like most shows that are funny, I can't commend everything they do. But there's this one episode where the city of Pawnee is trying to find a new mural for their city building because they have this horrific history, and for some reason they make murals out of their terrible history. But the government, they say, hey, we need better murals, and so they reach out to the offices like police and sanitation, et cetera, and they ask them to come up with their own murals. And so the Parks and Rec office, they reach out to the people and they say, hey, let's all come up with our own murals because the office with the best mural, it gets hung in the building. And so what happens is each member of the Parks and Rec department, they come up with their own murals, and they're all just completely ridiculous. Like one is very bland, another is incredibly abstract. It's just like a bunch of shapes. And it's like that has nothing to do with Pawnee. It says another one is absolutely horrifying with all sorts of things involving a hamster wheel. The one good idea in the office is from the guy who's just like perpetually made fun of. So what happens is when they vote for whose mural is the best one, what happens? Everyone just votes for themselves. They just vote for themselves, and so they can't get over what they think is great, what their opinion is and what their preference is. And so what happens is they're in a stalemate. They can't agree on something, and this big, important task that they've been given, it can't happen because the group's so divided by these secondary things. And so here's the point. In a couple weeks, we're going to talk about the Great Commission, but we've talked about the Great Commission a lot here at Chesterfield Community Church. The Great Commission of making disciples of all nations, this is our big task. This is the big task that God has given to us, the church, to labor towards until Jesus comes back. And yet what happens so often, or what can happen so easily, is where we let our comfort, our opinions, our preferences, our thoughts on secondary issues, it can eclipse this big, important task to where it doesn't get done. And it doesn't get done because what's happening is as our comfort becomes top priority, our preferences become center stage in our world, and what happens, we end up pushing people away from Jesus. And this big task that we've been tasked with, it doesn't get done. It can't happen. It reminded me of when I first moved here, and it was when when we were gathering, everyone was wearing masks. And then we would have to kind of move out of that. And I don't know your story, I don't know a lot about you, but I know this. You probably had thoughts and opinions about that whole thing. And here's the deal, you were probably right, whatever they were, right? But you know what? Here's the deal. There comes a point when either our opinions and our strong feelings about something is going to win the day, or reaching people with the gospel will win the day. There comes a moment where those two things will come head to head, and in the moment, what's going to win? And I'm not saying that we have to be silent about issues that are important to us, but the context of 1 Corinthians 9 is within chapters 8 and 9. Paul is sacrificing rights left and right. Rights like his right to eat certain food, his right to drink, his right to take on a believing wife, his right to get paid from the church. Like he's sacrificing all these preferences, rights that he absolutely could cling to, and yet he's sacrificing them because it's not about himself. It's not about him getting his rights, and it's about reaching out to people with the gospel. And of course, again, don't hear me like we should be informed people. We should have strong convictions, and we should live out of those. But again, when these secondary convictions and our preferences and our comforts, when they go head to head with reaching people for Jesus, only one can win. And that's all I'm talking about. We must sacrifice preference to reach the lost. If something happens here at CCC, and I'm not laboring to make us all uncomfortable, but if at any moment it's a matter of us reaching people and us being comfortable, what are we going to do? What do you want to do? Do we want to reach people, or do we want to be comfortable and sacrifice? I know our church. I'm just telling us things that we already know. We must sacrifice preference at times to reach people. But secondly, we must care not only about depth, but about breadth, or width, you could write. We can't just care about depth. We also have to care about breadth. I came into ministry 12 years ago at a time where I feel like in my peers that I was talking to, we were kind of sick about churches who were a mile wide and an inch deep. And the youth ministry version of that would be like, the youth pastor would be like, hey, bring all your friends. We're giving away free iPods. Remember iPods, right? big free iPods and big screen TVs. And everybody was like, yeah, and they'd get this huge crowd. And then it's like they would trick people into responding to the gospel. And then you'd be so happy. And then what would actually happen is when life gets real and hard, of course, it would reveal those people didn't actually respond to the gospel. And so there was a trend in my circle, at least within my world at that time, where we wanted to kind of reject that, where we wanted to focus on going deep with people. And hear me, I think that is right. But the question is to what end? Like, what should be the result of us going deep with Jesus? There's a book by Robert Coleman called The Master Plan of Evangelism. And in it, he basically talks about how what did Jesus do? In his ministry, Jesus, he spent most of it with like 12 guys and going deep with them. He walked past masses all the time. He ran from masses all the time. He ran past people who are sick and needed healing, and yet he bypassed that. Why? Because he seemed to be singularly focused on going deep with a couple handfuls of people. And even within that group, he chose Peter, James, and John to go extremely deep with. But to what end? The goal, the idea behind Jesus going deep with these men was to where when he left and the Holy Spirit came, these men that were left behind, they had been with Jesus and they could exponentially grow the kingdom. Exponentially, they could represent Jesus because they had gone deep with him. But that was what the goal was, is go deep with Jesus so that you can then be Jesus to everybody that needs him. And I found that, our concern for people who are lost spiritually, whether it's there or not, that's primary evidence as to whether we're really going deep with Jesus in a meaningful way. Do you care or do you don't care? Well, if we're not caring for the lost, then we should know we're pretty far off from the heart of God. God cares for the lost. So going, you can't control whether people choose to follow Jesus or how they respond to your invitation to come to church, but we can care. Depth is the priority, but true depth, it will awaken you. It will awaken in you God's heart for people who need Jesus. And lastly, the last thing is that we need all of us in order to reach all kinds of people. We need all of us in order to reach all kinds of people. Clearly, Paul was not interested in just reaching one type of person. He was interested in reaching all types of people. He was not just Jews, but Gentiles, not just the strong, but the weak. Not just people who had a religious background, but people with no concept of who God was. Think how much easier would it have been if Paul was just looking to gather a church based off of one type of person. Jewish community church, or Gentile community church, or outside the law community church. That's actually kind of an awesome name. We should think about that. Outside the law community church. We don't see that. We see the gospel gathering all sorts of people together and not siloing them off from each other. The gospel is uniting all types of people together in one thing, in Jesus Christ. And so here's the point. There are people in your world. Is it just... We okay? It works. My point is this, and we're closing with this. There are people in your world that you and you alone are uniquely positioned to reach with Jesus for the gospel. It's so interesting. I've realized this recently. There's some people in my world who I wouldn't necessarily hang out with. I don't have just a ton of things in common with them, and yet for whatever reason, I feel that I have unique favor with them. And they don't care whether I'm a pastor, and yet I just feel like I have favor with them, and so you need me to in order for them to be reached, you need me to exercise the favor that God has given me with them to share Jesus with them. I think we all have something like that. You have people around you who you are uniquely positioned to reach for Jesus. And we need all of us to do that. We all have a part to play. All of us are needed in order to reach all kinds of people. So as we close, how do you need to respond? How do you need to respond? If you're in Christ, then at some point, somebody, somewhere, got over themselves, got over what they wanted to do that day, their plans, their comfort level, and they got over all of that they might tell you about Jesus. And that's my prayer, is that God would work so much in our hearts to where we would begin to just evaluate and identify things that are perhaps keeping us, whether it's preferences, things that we are clinging to for our own creature comforts, whatever it is, things that perhaps we need to let go of, that we might be best positioned to be reached, to reach people for Jesus. So maybe that's your story. Maybe you're someone, you're trying to figure out this whole Jesus thing, and I just want to say to you, I'm so glad you're here. The reason why we as a church are having this conversation is because there is good news to be shared. There's good news because God looked on sinners like me, sinners like you, and he was not apathetic. He looked on us with love, and that love drove Jesus to a cross where he bore the punishment for all of our sin, all of our shame, and he did it in our place. And he rose from the dead 3 days later, and he offers and extends an invitation to every single one of us, no matter who you are, Jewish, Gentile, consider yourself under the law or outside the law, or whatever it is. There's an invitation, and the invitation is just simply turn to Jesus. Look to Jesus. Trust in Jesus. Transfer all of your trust for what gets you into heaven one day, what makes you right in the eyes of God, and where abundant life is found right now. Put it all on Jesus. Have you done that? Here in a moment, I'm going to pray. We're going to have people on my right and your left, and vice versa. If you need someone that just to talk to and pray for you, they'll be there. I would love to talk with you and pray with you about that. How do you need to respond today? Let's go to the Lord in prayer. God, I pray that this moment would be like a sandbar in us in the midst of all the waves of just life and its craziness. God, would you help us as a church and as individuals just to stand firm on the foundation of your word? And God, it's your word that is pushing us towards all types of people who are like us and people who are not like us. People that we would love to go on vacation with, and people that we probably wouldn't hang out with naturally. And yet you're moving us to these people because, God, it's your desire that, God, that you might win them through us. God, we have to be a church that is all about reaching people no matter what it costs us personally, no matter what preferences we have to let go of. No matter the comforts, God, that we're letting go of. God, would you work in me? Let me be out in front in that. And God, would you work in every single one of us, God, that we might be a church where people meet Jesus. God, I'm so grateful, God, that there's good news. No matter who we are, no matter where we've been, God, you save anyone and everyone because Jesus was perfect in our place. God, if anyone here is not trusted, God, would you, by your Spirit, just prick their mind and their heart, God, that they might be sensitive to this news, and God, would they respond? Can't make that decision for them, but God, would you work in their hearts to the end, God, that they are just come to the end of themselves and they run to Jesus. God, thank you so much for loving us first, but God, help us walk away loving you more today. And I pray this in your name, Jesus, amen. How do you need to respond? Perhaps it's sitting still and just having a moment before we walk out into the bitter cold. Perhaps it's standing and just having a moment where you're singing at the top of your lungs. Whatever it is, I encourage you to respond to the word today and respond as you feel led.
Worthy.